In this video, I'm going to tell you what I think about the new Necromunda Core Box Set, and the new version of the rules, too. Editing Adam here. Just kind of a quick note at the beginning of this video. This is all a very kind of initial look at the new Necromunda Core box. The folks at GW sent it to me, and I had to kind of make this video a little quick because I had to make sure that it went live while I was at Gen Con. As I'm editing this, it's less than 6 hours until I leave to go to Gen Con. So I got to, get things done. And yeah, but I just want to let you folks know that this is not like the end all be all kind of, overlook of the entire thing. It's an initial kind of blush of what's in the box and what initial things I'm seeing from the rules. If you'd like to, after watching this video, see, more of a deep dive into the differences between old Necromunda and new Necromunda and all that kind of stuff, let me know in the comments, and then I'll see what I can do, like right when I get back from Gen Con. And if you're watching this and you're at Gen Con, first of all, hey, nice watching it while you're there at Gen Con. That's very cool. I appreciate it. And secondly, if I see you there at Gen Con, stop by and say hi. So last month, Games Workshop announced a new version of the Necromunda rules, along with like a new core box set, some fancy new crew boxes, which are, basically have existing sculpts on them, but they're kind of, clumped together in these crew boxes versus just the singular gang boxes, and a few new books, and a little bit of this and that, right? They didn't really say much else other than the rules would be, streamlined and revised and stuff like that. I did a video about the presentation here, Pachow, and I kind of analyzed the things that they said during that presentation, quoted things, put them on the screen, all that kind of stuff. Necromunda is a skirmish sci-fi game, and both of these things are like right up my alley, right? However, I'd never really played Necromunda because I bounced off of the rules. They were very, very dense, and the books were kind of difficult and numerous. Well, now all is revealed. The stuff went on pre-order today and will be available in stores on August 15th. Games Workshop sent me the core box, the first thing that they've sent me in like an entire year, actually, because I'm a big fan of sci-fi and skirmish is probably why they sent it to me. But I'm not really a fan of Kill Team anymore, which is also sci-fi and skirmish. I'm not really a fan as much since they changed it drastically in 2021. So a lot of folks were concerned that this new version of Necromunda would kind of fall afoul to the same types of changes that, in my opinion, kind of wrecked Kill Team, at least for me, right? I'm just going to lead off here and say that I don't find that to be true here with the new Necromunda. There have been some changes, mostly for the better, but it's still Necromunda, in my opinion. Full disclosure, as I said, GW sent this to me, but no money changed hands. Can you imagine? And they didn't, they got no input into the contents of this video, and they didn't get to see it before I posted it, and all that normal type of stuff. The opinions here are all my own. A guy who, loves sci-fi skirmish games and always wanted to like Necromunda, and I own so many of the models and so much of the terrain and a whole bunch of the books, strangely, but I just never quite got it. Let's take a look at the box. All right, so first things first, they've changed the name a little bit. It is now called Warhammer Necromunda Skirmish, or Warhammer Skirmish Necromunda. I guess it depends on how you want to do it. Here's the old book. It used to just be Necromunda, right? This is the old, not the old 2017, but this is the most recent giant honkin' core rule book, and I'm going to do some comparison in a bit, but I just wanted to show you they've changed up the logo a little bit. And, it's got the standard Escher versus Goliath guys on the front. I kind of wish they would put somebody else in the core book, but I guess it's like orcs and space marines, or just anything in space marines that you're going to do. But nonetheless, yeah, the box is, frankly, there's not a lot of stuff inside here. It's not bad, but if you've seen any of the preview things,
It is literally just a paper mat, which is double-sided. It's got printing on both sides. And then it's this terrain. This is one sprue of pipes. Now, if you don't know much about Necromunda, Necromunda is generally designed to be a very three-dimensional game. When I first got interested in it back in the 90s, I would be at Gen Con when it was still in Milwaukee, and I would sit for hours and watch people play Necromunda on these crazy three-dimensional boards with all kinds of stuff going on. I was just enamored of the whole concept. And then when the 2017 version came out, it kind of didn't have any rules for like three-dimensional stuff. It wasn't until I think there was a Gang Wars book that came out close after that that added in, oh, sure, yeah, you can climb ladders and do things like that. But initially, it was just a very, very flat kind of game. And people were concerned when they saw the pictures from this, from this release going, hey, look at this flat mat and look at these little bits of pipes and stuff like that. The rules come with all kinds of, stuff about climbing and falling and jumping and all that kind of stuff. So you don't have to worry about that. They did not 2D the game. They definitely kept it 3D. They just didn't give you much to make it 3D in this particular set. And I'll talk a little bit more about costs and this and that and the other thing. Like this pipe stuff is cool. I'm going to use it in the terrain that I'm building. I just am just going to glue it down to Zone Mortalis tiles as a little bit of extra, neat looking stuff. All right, you get Goliath models and you get Escher models, which you've probably seen those if you've been looking. I think there's 8 models of each. They're all new sculpts. They're fine. They're fine. They really are. I'm not really into either of those gangs. Those are the 2 gangs that I don't even know if I've ever bought any of the stuff for those guys. I've bought stuff from pretty much everybody else, but not Escher and Goliath. So if you want to see those sculpts or whatever, you can find those online. It's pretty simple. But you're getting 4 sprues of that. You're also getting a sprue of plastic tokens. These are kind of new. I don't remember them ever having plastic tokens before. You can paint these or not, I suppose, but it's going to be a lot of clipping and trying to get all that stuff off. But at least they're not cardboard tokens, and they're kind of small, which is nice too. In the instructions, they're like, oh, you can put it on the cards or you can put it near the models. But generally, they prefer, I think, that you put it near the cards because if you're running around in the terrain, it's hard to lump several of these things next to a guy sometimes. So it's probably something you're going to do to put on the cards. In all of the artwork and photography that they've showed off for this game so far, it's always been in black and red. So I don't know how they did that. I don't know if they dry brushed it or what. Like, I don't particularly relish going through and trying to paint all these things, so I don't know that that's going to happen. If I'm smart, I'll try to prime them and then maybe throw a wash on them, maybe speed paint. That might work. I don't know, something like that. Anyway, and then, of course, there's the tried and true Blast and Flamer templates. Those don't seem to have changed much. These are nice to see because a lot of people thought that that was going to be maybe a thing. When there was initial early rumors, people were like, well, they're going to take all that stuff out because they took this stuff out at 40K years ago. But it's still here. We're still good. And then there's this ruler, which they always showed it kind of stacked on top of each other. And it wasn't until recently that I was zoomed way in on the pictures that I noticed it's not 2 12-inch rulers. It's a ruler that goes all the way to 24 inches, right? And that's because it's got a hole and like a thing over here. So when you cut this out, you can basically like stick them together, like it's a hinge. So you can use the short range, but if you need the longer range, you just flip it out, and now you've got up to a 24-inch ruler, which is actually kind of nice. That's a really cool thing. They didn't give you any of the little red whippy sticks for you to hit your friends with, but you could probably hit your friends with this, or just use your fists. I don't know. There's a core dice set that's kind of hidden under this flap over here. The dice set is taped closed, but this part's ripped, so I can get it out. They're black and yellow, and they're just the standard Necromunda dice. Everything is still in there: scatter dice, firepower dice, injury dice, regular dice, the whole shebang. So that's kind of nice. They still have the little Necromunda symbol on the 6s. Luckily, they're not on the 1s, so thank goodness for that. But if you've already got Necromunda dice, you're set. But if you don't, then, there you go. Also in here somewhere, there's a bunch of bases. Here. And these are the standard Necromunda style bases that look like they're, plate decking and stuff like that. So that's very cool as well. But then we get into the book and the printed materials. So we start out with a core set starter guide and construction booklet, and it basically has instructions on how to build the models in there, but it also has the gang lists for the models that come in the book or in the box. So you get one for Goliath and one for Escher. And the thing that's very interesting, this was a thing that a lot of people were also concerned about. They did not kill teamify the army building. It is not just like, here's your list, you have a couple of options. It's full-blown like regular Necromunda where you're just going through and going, I want to get this and I want to do that, and this guy gets a grenade and he gets a pinwheel and he gets a cookie, and like you can just add in all kinds of things like that. And so it's got that same sort of vibe that Necromunda's kind of always had, which is great. So that's a useful thing to have. And then there's also a bunch of other stuff in here. There's a bunch of cards. So you have, these are the crew selection cards for basically making the scenarios and stuff like that. There's a lot of cards in here, and I'll get to those in a second. But there's also the book. This is the new rule book. The new core rule book. Now, the thing that's interesting about this, hang on a second, let me readjust a bit. So here's the current core rule book. It weighs a ton, and it says core rulebook. And here's the new core rulebook. And you can tell the difference because one says Warhammer Necromunda Skirmish and one just says Necromunda. This is the new core rulebook. Look at the difference there. This new core rulebook is only about 2/3 the thickness of this monstrous, massive current core rulebook. The core rulebook, I think, currently, the one that you could buy just up until recently, it says 336 pages. Unwieldy, in my opinion. This one is like 186, maybe? Nope, 168. 168 pages and an index, which is great. It's really nice to have, in my opinion, a book that's not so thick. Now, why is it not so thick? What did they have to strip out? Well, I'm going to be perfectly frank with you. There's about 20 pages less of fluff. There's about 30 pages of fluff in here, and the old one's got 50 pages of fluff. So, that's a thing. They just sort of, I think, were smarter with layout. You've got a contents information stuff in here. Again, we go through, we've got fluff. We're talking about, here's the, Lord Helmar, blah, 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 the different hives of Necromunda, anatomy of a hive, all this kind of stuff. And then eventually you do get to the how to play the game. Here we go, rules introduction, right? And a lot of the artwork is reused. There's probably some new stuff in there as well, but a lot of the things as I was kind of comparing and contrasting back and forth between these two books, I'm like, oh yeah, there's that same piece of artwork again, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. One of the best things I think that they've done in this new book, everything is very clear. Like, if you've played with any of the older Necromunda books closer back to 2017, it was a black background almost of grunge on the page with then black text over it. And it was very difficult to read. This book understands that none of us is getting any younger. This book is incredibly simple to read. It's clean. There's never a time where I'm like, man, I wish they hadn't put that thing in the way so that I can't see the text very well. It's incredibly clear and easy to read, which is awesome. The font is very easy to read. This heading font that they use for like subheadings or whatever, like you get the big heading for a section, first principles, fighters, vehicles, and models. It's just very readable. Everything that they did in here so far seems like it is designed to make the book more accessible to more people, and also easier for you to find things. I've had a really good time just being like, well, I figure this should be here, and then finding it and being really easy to do, which was very difficult to do with the old book. There's these kind of arbitrator toolkit sections that they pop out, which are like notes. Throughout these rules, you will find arbitrators toolkits. These are optional rules that can be used in battles to add additional character if both players agree before the battle or the campaign arbitrator wishes. So you have still the arbitrator if you want to go down that road or not, but either way, you have all these different, things. There's a one, optional thing, no pre-measuring. If the arbitrator wishes, in their campaign, they may represent the uncertainty of gang warfare in the Underhive by allowing players to measure distances only after an action has been declared. If the action is not possible, due to the target being outside the weapon's long range, the model still attempts it, would still make a shot, blah, blah. So they're giving you options, which is great. One of these little arbitrator boxes, I don't know where it is, but it basically was just like, look, this is not a competitive game, is what one of them said. And I was just was like, oh, that's great to hear. It's great that they're doing that. It's just that they've tightened things up a bit. Cover is different than it used to be. Instead of it being like, well, are you less than half in cover, more in half than cover, this and that and all that kind of stuff, cover is very simple now. Cover is basically, if you're in cover, if you are blocked, if your body is blocked at all, a leg, an arm, not necessarily like a gun or hair or things like that, and they've got examples to show, then this is a guy in cover, this is a person who's not in cover because all that's blocked is their base, this person's also in cover, and this one you can't even see, so therefore they're not even in cover, they're just not in your line of sight. They've changed terrain a little bit. You still have impassable terrain, but now you have difficult and dangerous terrain, which I don't think was quite the same thing. They've sort of streamlined those things. When you're moving on difficult terrain, you're moving at half movement. Dangerous terrain, you're rolling a 1 like you used to back in the day of 40K, and you might take some damage. Cover is also interesting, too, because they've changed the way that weapons work. I think we get to that soon. D6s, D66s, D3s. They go through the different dice and rolling dice and how that all works. It's all very clear. That's one of the things that I think is most important. They've streamlined things here and there, little bits and pieces, but they've also just made the book so much clearer. You're not hopping around trying to the thing about damage is in the combat section as opposed to this section, and you're not constantly hopping back and forth as much. Here are all the different conditions and statuses now. You've got ready and activated, and these are all related to those plastic markers I showed you before. Suppressed, they don't do pinned anymore. There's wound markers, you got injured, insanity, webbed, and out of ammo. And that's pretty much about it as far as conditions are concerned. So they've stripped a bunch of those as well. Some veteran players may remember earlier editions of Necromunda where fighters were laid down on the battlefield to show their status. This has been changed in this edition due to difficulty with some models in laying them down on their front or back. However, if players wish, they may represent the suppressed status by laying the model on their back and the seriously injured status by placing the model on their front, like if you didn't want to use the tokens and stuff like that. So I think for people who are coming from previous editions, this is not going to be a giant splash of cold water making things change drastically. And there's even places like this where they're just going to be like, look, if you want to play it the old way, knock yourself out. You know what I mean? Different model types. Just as a point of reference, there doesn't seem to be Juves anymore. There's prospects, but no Juves. In your fighter subtypes, you've got Beast, Brute, Champion, Flying, Ganger, Hanger-On, Leader, Loner, Mounted, Pet, and lastly is Prospect, Specialist, Support, and Weird. Weird are basically Psychers. I don't know why they changed the name from Psychers to Weird, but they did. They kind of spell it like the Malifaux people, like Weird Games, you know? And then there's vehicle subtypes and things like that. And then you're getting into some stuff about the conditions and insanity. But again, a lot of that stuff's been kind of turned down. The gang profile, the ganger profile, the model profile, your fighter, it doesn't look particularly different. There's little tiny tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it's there. And then the weapon profiles. This is the change that I noticed the most. It used to be you had a short range and long range, and then directly after that on the profile, it would then show you what the accuracy modifiers were for short and long range. The accuracy modifiers are gone now. Now you have short range and long range. Well, why do you have short range and long range if there's no accuracy modifiers? Because it has to do with cover. So if I'm shooting you and you're in cover, if I'm in my short range for that weapon, you have a +1 to your save for cover. If I'm in my long range, you have a +2. That's pretty much about it. Now, is that stripping a little bit of flavor out of all the different weapons where some of them were like short range is accuracy -1, but it's not for long range? Some weapons only had a modifier on long range. Some weapons had a modifier on short range and long range. It's pulling a little bit of that out, but it's also pulling out all of the cognitive load of you keeping track of like which weapons do what and all that kind of stuff. Now, short range, long range, it just basically affects cover. Also, they got rid of damage. It's not really rid of it, but that it used to be a D here, and now it's an L, and that L stands for lethality. This represents how lethal the weapon is. This in turn indicates how many injury dice are rolled against a target that has been reduced to 0 wounds as a result of the attack. Most people in Necromunda seem to have like 1 wound. There are some that have more, but a lot of them have 1 wound. So if you do something to them with your gun that brings them to 0, then you look at this L here and you go, oh, that's a 2, and you throw 2 lethality dice, right? For example. It's explained more on page 77. If a weapon's lethality is dash, then its traits will decide how it resolves hits from it and that kind of stuff. In traits over here, you've still got like all kinds of different traits in rapid fire, but sometimes some weapons, like plasma weapons, do 2 damage, but instead of it being D here, that damage is listed in the traits. Melta weapons do 3 damage, stuff like that. But most weapons don't have a damage because they just do 1. But it's special weapons that do that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of little, and I don't want to go here through the entire rules booklet, or not booklet, it's a full-blown book. It's just that as I've been going through and looking at it, the things that have kept me from playing the game in the past, because it was just difficult to go through this old book. And this old book was even better than the original, like 2017 books. But it was just a lot denser. There's just a lot more stuff. There's also a lot more artwork in here. There's plenty of pages where I would sit and have one book open and the other book open, and it would be identical text. They would just be pulling a little bit of the extra interstitial artwork, that was in here, taking up page count, and they just pull it out so that it wasn't in here, and you're ending up with a slightly thinner book, which is easier to carry, frankly, and stuff like that. Another thing that this book does not particularly have, it does have some campaign stuff, but not a lot of campaign stuff. I have a suspicion that the campaign stuff is going to be things that show up in different books down the road. They talked a little bit in the Q&A that they did, that GW did. They mentioned journals, and I'm wondering if they're, instead of having like the gang books, since there's 2 gang books that are coming out. They didn't send them to me, so I don't have them. I'm going to have to get them from my local shop when they come out. But those gang books have all of the stats and stuff like that for all of the different armies or the different gangs. So I can't show you any of that stuff because I don't have those books. But when those come out, there's one that's for most of the gangs who hang out inside the hives, and then there's one for all of the randos and stuff like that. And those are the 2 books that you need. And it doesn't look like they're going to be producing a bunch of extra books like they've done in the past, where here's a book for this gang and here's a book for this gang, and they became almost like codices. What they're going to be doing, I think, is probably making campaigns. Now, you'll be able to use the cards that I kind of talked about before to make your own kind of like, it's kind of like what they're doing more and more with 40K. They did it with War Cry, where you're like, okay, here's your deployment card, here's your twist card, that kind of stuff, and that's very cool. I don't know enough about that. I might do a video about that stuff a little bit later on. But the thing that's really interesting, I think, about this stuff, I was assuming for reasons that this box was going to be $200. I was pretty sure it was going to be $200. It's $165 American. I don't know what it is overseas and things like that, but it's $165. Now, I'm not going to say that that's a good price. I'm going to say it's a surprisingly good price kind of for Games Workshop. But if you sit down and look at the rest of the industry, but let's just understand, Games Workshop prices are always higher than everybody else's, and let's just take that off the table. I get it. I just assumed this box was going to be $200 to $220, just because everything's been getting more expensive, not just Games Workshop, but everything in the entire world. $165 I thought was not bad. Now again, you're getting a book, you're getting 2 gangs, and you're getting a crappy amount of terrain and some other stuff. So it's not crazy, but I was kind of surprised. If you decide you just want to buy the book and you don't want the rest of this stuff, this is $53, which is not bad. I mean, some of the most recent books they've put out have been roughly the same price, but I was assuming this was also going to be kind of expensive for some reason because it's the core book. The 2 gang books that are be coming out soon, as well, which I don't have, those will also be $53. And again, you'll buy one of those books and it will have Escher, Cawdor, Vansar, Orlok, Delok, like all those army, groups in one book. And then the other one's got like, the ash wastes and like the squats and like all that stuff, and they're in the other book. So if you have like an army that's like, well, I've got the squats and I've got these guys, you need them both. But if you had like Palanite Enforcers, Cawdor, and Delak, they would all be in one book, and so you would just need the one, right? Now, like I said, probably going to be some campaign books in the future, but we will see. The other thing that's interesting is the prices for the crew boxes came out, and they're only $94. Now, what that is going to include is, from what I can tell, it's going to include 2 gang boxes, one that is for the normal gang and one that's like an add-on for the gang, and those generally run about $53 each. And I believe, I can't find it now again where I've looked, but I swear at one point they said they're also going to throw in a weapon sprue, which is another benefit. So $94 to basically get you an entire crew, not just a single gang where then you need to buy another box. That's not bad either. So I'm cautiously optimistic, even more than I was before, because the prices are not terrible. They did not seem to change the rules incredibly drastically, and I'm kind of on board. So I already had a Cawdor gang built and painted for the previous version of the rules, and as soon as I get my hands on the gang books, like I said, they didn't send them to me, then I'll build a list for the models that I have already built and painted from that force. And again, like I said, from everything that I can see and hear about how to build a gang, it's very much like it was in the past. One thing that changed is the trading post. So the trading post information is in this book, as opposed to being in a different book for quite a long time until they finally squunched it all together into one big book. But the way that you do the trading post stuff is very different. Like when you want to buy things that are sort of fancy and kind of rare, it's really kind of interesting. And again, I might go over that in a future video as well. But once my plan is to also start building a few other gangs as well, probably starting with the Palanite Enforcers. I've kind of always wanted to paint those guys. I think they're kind of like interesting sculpts. And I've also been working on my Zone Mortalis terrain, which I love, absolutely. I love working on that stuff. But now I'll be able to actually use it for Necromunda and not just for other sci-fi skirmish games, which was my previous plan. I got to admit, it's been a while since I was excited for a GW game, and hopefully things stay pretty good for a while. We'll see. So that's all I know about the new version of Necromunda. The rules seem pretty promising, and the prices aren't crazy high, when you compare them to the rest of Games Workshop. What do you think? Are you a lapsed Necromunda player, kind of interested in starting again? Or are you like me, Necromunda curious, but put off by all of the old rules and the piles of books back in the day? Let us all know down in the comments below. And an Underhive depressmentation of the like button or the hype button on mobile would be greatly appreciated by me here in the Underhive or whatever. And also, while you're pushing buttons, if you haven't pushed the subscribe button, you should do that. Buttons are a lot of fun, according to my friend Vince Venturella, so you should push them. And also, it's free. It gets more videos pushed in front of you from me every single Friday, and sometimes on Saturday as well. Thanks for watching.